Let's do this thing. Next, I read The Henna Wars by... I'm a horrible person. You know what? No, I'm gonna look it up right now. Okay, I have been saying it in a way that sounds correct. So it's The Henna Wars by Adipa Jagidar. And this follows a Muslim Bengali. I believe her family's Muslim, but her family's from Bangladesh, and she's a lesbian, and her parents have always told her, like, you can be anything you want, you can do anything that you want in your life, but you can't be a lesbian, basically. Like, they didn't say it in those explicit terms, but, like, that's sort of what they hint at her. So she sort of feels very trapped by that because she knows that she's never going to feel about guys the way that she feels about girls, the way that her parents want her to feel about guys. And at the very beginning of the book, she rekindles her friendship with a former classmate named Flavia. And Flavia is Brazilian and black. And the funniest thing that I find about this book is that they both live in Ireland. That's such a weird combination of things. Like, one person's Bengali, and so her family immigrated there, and then Flavia lived in Ireland when she was younger, and then when her parents got divorced, they moved, and they moved back. And it's just like a whole weird coincidence of things. And I think that this book is really heartwarming while also tackling some really important topics. There is a trigger warning in the beginning of this book for racism, homophobia, bullying, and then one of the characters actually gets outed to the school. So, like, first of all, we love normalizing trigger warnings at the beginning of books, but also, like, if any of those things could be potentially harmful to you, please know that they're in there and they're major themes, and I don't want anyone to be hurt by the book. This book was really, really cute. I loved getting to learn about, I don't think I ever said her name, but her name is Newett, and I love learning about her culture. She talked about her grandmother doing henna on her. At the beginning, they're all at this big wedding, which was really interesting, and getting to see them become friends. While there were some things that felt annoyingly high schoolish, like there was some character conflict that felt like it could have been resolved, I know people that would have acted exactly like the characters in this book if the same conflict had happened to them. So I'm not mad about it because it's definitely very relevant to high schoolers, and I think that it's definitely possible that it would have happened, but it was just kind of like, now I was a little bit annoyed because I was like, just figure it out. Anyway, but this book was amazing and adorable, and I really, really liked it. Next, I read We're Okay by Lacour, which is about a girl named Marin who moved to New York from California for college. It's sort of under mysterious circumstances because she's like the only person on campus not going home for winter break for freshman year, and no one really asks her why. And then at the very beginning of the book, her former best friend Mabel comes to visit, and we learn that she actually hasn't talked to Mabel since before she left California, so over like 3 or 4 months ago. Mabel has tried to like text her, communicate with her, but she hasn't really communicated back. And so throughout the course of the book, we're seeing from both the present timeline in New York during Christmas break, like over December, I should say winter break, sorry, at the end of December. And we're also seeing the past timeline, which happens like mostly over the summer, but also talks about things that happened further in the past and sort of about why Marin is feeling the way she's feeling. And I do think that this book could be incredibly triggering for some people because it deals heavily with themes of depression and sort of hints at a suicide. But this book is incredibly important, dealing with like grief and learning how to do that when your brain is still developing is such an important idea to convey to people in general. So while this book could be harmful to some people, if you're in a good mental place to read it, please do. Plus, it's sapphic, so like, even better. Okay, next I read Black Enough, edited by E.B. Zoboy. And this book contains a whole bunch of short stories, all the authors are right here, I'm not going to list them all out, that follow different Black characters living in the US. So yeah, I'm pretty sure all in the US. To me, it had every kind of experience in here. I know it probably doesn't have every single kind of experience, but it did have most experiences. And it was a beautiful thing because it didn't focus on police brutality the way that a lot of books about Black people do, which is frustrating because it's like, that's not the only thing that happens, and if we focus on that, like, that's not what we want. There's a lot of stuff going around right now on the internet about like Black joy and embracing Black joy, and like, while this isn't entirely joyful, because there are sad things, and there is one story that deals pretty heavily with homophobia, there's still so much joy in this book, and I would highly, highly recommend it, especially if you're trying to read more books by Black authors about Black characters. Next, I read Tyler Johnson Was Here by J. Coles. J. Coles is one of the authors in Black Enough, and his story was the one that talked a lot about homophobia, and because, you know, I love a good LGBTQ plus story, I thought I should pick up this book because I've had it for a long time and I hadn't read it. And Tyler Johnson Was Here, oh my god, why did I just forget his name? Tyler Johnson Was Here follows a kid named Marvin who has a twin brother, and his dad is in jail, and he lives in a predominantly Black neighborhood. And one night at a party that goes wrong and like the cops show up and try to break it apart, his brother Tyler goes missing. That's why it's called Tyler Johnson Was Here. One thing that I will say, I'm going to talk about The Hate U Give next, so like I'll talk more about this, but this book and The Hate U Give get pitted against each other a lot, and I think that while they deal with similar topics, that they shouldn't be, because these books have such different experiences in them, right? Tyler Johnson, it's his twin brother who he's known his entire life, who he's been intertwined with for like his entire life. His dad is in jail for some awful reason. His principal is an ass to him, all of these things. And this book follows Star, what I think most people know because this book is pretty popular, but this book follows Star, whose best friend is murdered by the police, and then his movement sort of blows up, but Star has a very different living experience than Marvin does in this book, and so I think that while it is completely valid that these two books are put in the same bucket, they shouldn't be thought of as interchangeable. No book should be thought of as interchangeable, obviously. But this story is just as important as this story, and I want this story to get as much hype as this story does. Because like I said, they're both incredibly important, and they both have such different experiences. And it's just so important to see both sides, I believe. The Hate U Give. I read this book last year? The year before. I read this book in 2018. One thing I find interesting, so the first 20 pages of this book are out of order. So when you read the first 20 pages of my copy specifically, you have to sort of flip back and forth to get the right pages in the right order. I thought this book was just as important as the first time that I read it, and like I said when I was talking about Tyler Johnson, this book is still incredibly important, and unfortunately is still incredibly relevant, and I wish that it wasn't, because no one wants their child to die because of police brutality. No one wants to die because of police brutality. It's disgusting. ACAB, defund the police. Anyway, yeah, I don't have much to say about this book because it's good, obviously. We all know this. Everyone read it, so we're kind of almost done. Next, I picked up The Future of Another Timeline by Annalee Newett, which was a book club pick for the Indie Book Club. I didn't mention the other ones that I read for book clubs, but like, it's fine. Let's just not worry about it. Now I feel like I have to. Okay. I read The Henna Wars for a book club pick with a book club that I do on Instagram, and I read We Are Okay for a book club pick for a book club that I do on Twitter and now on Discord. Okay, great. Cool. That's done. This book was for the NB Book Club, which is a book club that focuses on reading books with non-binary authors, main characters, side characters, with some sort of non-binary character in them. This book is a little complicated. I don't entirely know how to describe it. It's about time travel, obviously, Future of Another Timeline, and it follows a character named Tess and a character named Beth, and Tess's like main timeline is 2021. And in 2021, she is a professional time traveler, and what she does is go back into the past to sort of fix the timeline and make it so that, specifically in this book, they're fighting for rights for women, specifically on abortion, because there is a terrorist group that's trying to basically erase the history that abortions were ever legal. So the main character is trying to combat them. And in the past, we're following Beth, who, let's see, she lives in 1992? She's in 1992, and she and her friends get mixed up in some not very good things. I will say that this book has a ton of trigger warnings transphobia. I think there's a little bit of, there's a small case for homophobia. There's definitely some racism. There's talk of suicide, sexual abuse, rape, and serial killing. So just like, I think I talked more about these a little bit in my Instagram post that I did about this book, but although this book is really, really great and I loved it, be warned because it has a lot of triggers, and I think that's really important to know. I feel like I have a hard time forming thoughts about this book because it's just so complex. It feels so big and I don't know how to conceptualize it in my brain. I don't want to say that I'm too dumb for this book, but I think that I would need to reread it 1 or 2 more times to really fully grasp what goes on in the book, if that makes sense. But I highly, highly recommend it, and it does have a non-binary side character, so we love that. And next, I read Not Your Sidekick by C.B. Lee, which I think I've read a lot of, I guess it's called speculative fiction, like where the world is virtually the same, but 1 or 2 things have changed. I mean, it's sort of like that in Upright Women Wanted. It's sort of like that in, sorry, I'm looking at my book stack over here. It's sort of like that in Beneath the Sugar Sky. It's sort of like that in Vengeful. It's sort of like that in Future Another Timeline, and it's definitely like that in this book. Because the main thing that changed is that there are superheroes. And let's see, superpowers are genetic, and you get classified based on how good your superpower is. So Class A, Class B, Class C, and then very rarely Class D, because that's such a low power level that they hardly ever test you even for those. And the main character, Jess, is the daughter of her town's most famous superheroes, and she's all excited because she knows that she is probably going to have a power because her parents are Class C superheroes. Because both of her parents are superheroes, it's more likely that she's going to have a power. So she keeps trying and trying and trying and trying and trying, but she finally has to accept that it's her 17th birthday and she's never going to really have a power because it hasn't happened yet. And so to distract herself from this, she gets an internship at a big tech company in their city, and she has to start working for her family's arch nemesis, like the villains of the town. And it's funny and goofy, and like the tech is all different because it's set in the future, but it's also really, really intriguing. And like it's a really fun, lighthearted book about superheroes, but it also deals with like greater things like people being villainized and all of this stuff. So it's really, really interesting. And it's sapphic. And there's a trans character, so I can't wait to read book 2. Next, I went to the bookstore with my sister, and I got this really cute book that I've had my eye on for a while. It's just a little graphic novel, and that is A Quick and Easy Guide to Queer and Trans Identities by Maddie G. and J.R. Zuckerberg. So this book, which was written, I believe, by 2 non-binary cartoonists and illustrators. Yeah, 2 non-binary cartoonists and illustrators. And it talks all about, obviously, a quick and easy guide to queer and trans identities. And it was like, okay, the illustrations, in case you can't tell from the cover, the illustrations are adorable. And it's super informative. And so I think that if there's someone in your life who wants to know more about queer and trans identities, this is a really great way to do it. Besides like having to Google and like, you know, filter through all the stuff that's BS or just too long. It warms my heart. It's just so cute. And it made me happy. And it's pretty short, and it's adorable, so yeah. Next, I read Blood Witch by Susan Dennard, which is the 3rd book in the Witchland series by Susan Dennard. And I put off reading this book for so long because I wanted to reread the entire series. Because this series is super high fantasy. Like, world building galore. There's so many little moving pieces. And the plots are insane of each book. Just like, I feel like nothing's ever getting resolved. Everything's just like upping and upping and upping and upping, and I love it. I love it. But it's also very difficult when it takes me a year, because there's a year between every release date. Like the next book in the series isn't coming out until 2021. And I'm not going to remember anything that happened in this book when we get there. So I'm going to want to reread the whole series again. But that's also hard because this series is so thick. Not thick, but dense. You have to be very focused for everything. But like, it's so worth it. It's so worth it. The first book mainly, I mean, we branch out character-wise, but the first book mainly follows 2 girls, Safi and Isolde. And Safi is what's called a truth witch, which basically she can tell truth from lie. Like when people are talking, or even when she's just sort of looking at the world, because there's glamour, like there's a lot of magic in this world. So there's like glamour, she can tell when there's a glamour because of her magic. And being a truth witch is like, it's a super sought after witchery because it's pretty rare, and like obviously you could use that in politics. So she's hidden her truth witchery from everyone because she doesn't want to be traded around like a pawn or anything. And then her best friend Isolde, who's also what is called her thread sister, is a thread witch who can basically see the threads that connect people to things and like their emotions and stuff, and can even manipulate them in some people. And at first it's just them doing fun tricks and hanging out with their adoptive parents, Matthew and the other dude. And then the plot thickens from there. And it's really good, it's really good, it's really good, it's really, really good. And I feel like I don't see enough hype for this series, but it's amazing. And I love it, and please, please, please read it. Please read it. Support Susan Dennard. She's such an amazing author. I followed her whole journey because she just had her baby, and like I got to follow her whole journey on Instagram, and it was so cute. And like getting to see her write Blood Witch and struggle, because obviously if you're an author and you don't struggle writing a book, like you can have some easy ones, but if you don't have one book that just like kills you, this book is so precious and I love it. I think that almost every single book I read this month, I loved. Like I feel like every single book I've been like, oh my gosh, read it, it's so good, amazing. And now comes the one. We're doing better than last month, guys. The one that I was like, oh god, and that is Paper Towns by John Green. I've read 3 other John Green books. I've read Turtles All the Way Down, I've read Looking for Alaska, and I've read The Fault in Our Stars, like way back when it was popular, and now I've read this book. And the concept of this book was really interesting, but I wasn't hooked into the story until the last half, the part 3. So this is too much to wait in a story to be hooked. And the only reason I kept reading it was because I didn't know what else I wanted to read, so I was like, well, might as well just keep going. But I found the characters incredibly annoying and narcissistic, and all of these things, yeah, I didn't like it. It wasn't good. I think I gave it a 2-star. That's like, I rarely ever give books less than 5 or 4 stars. I usually vary between 4 and 5 depending on like, if I really, really loved it, or if I thought it was a really great book. That's usually like 4 and 5. 3, sometimes if like 1 or 2 things bugged me, but I liked it overall, and then like this book is a 2. I didn't like it. And I know that by saying that I'm not going to damage John Green's career in any way at all, so yeah. Next I read All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson, which is a young adult memoir manifesto about him coming to terms with his queerness and his blackness and sort of like navigating the world of being queer and black, which although I don't know, I have heard from many people and from books that that is a huge problem because 2 marginalized identities is like 1 too many. And I do have to say, this book was amazing. I think that it's incredibly important that people get to read this book and understand so many things about the Black queer experience. And while this doesn't speak for every Black queer person, I think that it's important that this story gets told and shared and all of these things. And it's hard for me to talk about this book because it's like, this is someone's life. I don't want to criticize someone's life because other books that are fiction, it's like this isn't, I'm not criticizing someone's life. Like here I would be criticizing someone's life. And the 2 things that I would like to say about this book is that there are 2 parts in the book that felt as a trans person and as an ace person that felt kind of aphobic and transphobic. And I genuinely believe that George M. Johnson didn't intend for this book to feel that way. I genuinely believe that this story is important, and I genuinely believe that he never meant to hurt anyone with the words that he said in this book, but I think that they could be hurtful if someone who was trans or ace read them out of context. There's one instance where he talks about sex being the classic ace argument. It's like, he's like, sex is such an important thing and everyone should experience it, blah blah blah, which isn't true. If you don't want to have sex, don't have sex. That's how it works. I can read you the quote. I feel like this is a little bit of a spoiler. Sex is a part of growth as a human regardless of gender and sexual identity. No one has the right to deny us the resources we need to properly engage with each other. Which is like, this is true because a lot of queer people struggle with that because sex education is entirely lacking, especially in my country. But the most important part about that, especially in sex education, is that you don't have to have sex ever, at all. Not required at all. You never need to. Please know that. And the other time he was talking about his identity and how he changed he basically went from calling himself gay to calling himself queer. And the exact quote is, "My attraction to trans people and others represented in the letters across the LGBTQIAP+ acronym have led me to identify as queer instead of gay." And once again, I don't think that he meant that in a harmful way. I genuinely think he was talking about non-binary people and how he's attracted to non-binary people, which is completely valid if you're gay and attracted to non-binary people. You can completely use the term queer or bi or whatever makes you comfortable. Please understand that that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the way that it was worded when he said queer, trans people and other people across the spectrum, my first thought there was, so do you not date trans guys? And that's not the first thought I want to be having, if that makes sense. I believe that he did not mean that in a malicious way towards trans people at all. He has an entire chapter where he talks about his trans cousin and coming to terms with the fact that she was trans, even though the rest of their family was kind of like, I don't really want to. While I understand that, that quote can be incredibly damaging to some people, and I want everyone to understand that it's there. And this is not me saying this book is bad, and this is not me saying that you shouldn't read this book, because please do, because it's an amazing book, but I do want people to understand that these things are in there and that they're important to remember. That's all. I've been having a lot of discussions about this book on Instagram, because I posted a lot about it while I was reading it, and so I just thought that it was important for me to put that out there. Once again, I'm not criticizing the book, and I'm not really criticizing George Johnson at all. I think this book is amazing and incredible, and read it, and just... But I want people to understand that that's there, and while that might be his experience, that was not the best way to go about talking about either of those things, because it invalidated a lot of people, that's all. Finally, throughout the month, I listened to the audiobook for Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey Mcquisten. I have already read this book. It was a while ago, but I have already read it and I loved it. I thought it was beautiful and phenomenal and deserves all of the love that anyone can give it. And I just re-listened to it because first of all it's Pride Month, second of all it's a book club pick. I don't know how you guys feel about audiobook narrators, but I have not had a very good experience with them. This one, when I was listening to the audiobook, the narrator didn't feel genuine. Like the entire time he kind of felt like he was being sarcastic in like trying to voice Alex, but he also felt like he was being like a 30-year-old IT guy who still lives with his mom and brings like packed lunches with sandwiches with the crust cut off and wears like plaid button downs. That was such a stereotype, and I feel horrible for saying that. But I felt like the voice in the audiobook didn't quite embody Alex. I think his British accent and the way that he voiced Henry was excellent, and I was here for it. But I like the Alex section just felt kind of like, because it was all from Alex's point of view, it was just a little off, and I just like, I definitely, like, I'd say read the book. But yeah, this book is amazing, and it's so good, it's so cute. The characters are so adorable, and like, watching Alex be such a bisexual disaster is amazing, and I never want to stop rereading it for the rest of my life. I want to reread it now. I literally finished the audiobook on the 29th, so the night before last, and I want to reread it already. It's just so good, it's so good, it's so good, it's so good. And finally, I haven't picked up a new book yet, but I am intending today, or possibly tomorrow, but I hope today, to pick up Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. Like I said in my July TBR, I'm reading for a buddy read on Twitter, and I think like I've said in like 1,000,001 videos, this book was pitched to me as lesbian necromancers in space. And immediately I'm down. So I'm super excited to get to start this book, and I can't wait to read it and like see the lesbians being necromancers in space, because it's going to be beautiful and so gay. So I'm here for it. That was the copious amount of books that I read in June instead of letting myself have a mental breakdown. I'm fine, it's fine, everything's fine. I hope you guys got to read some fun books in June. I hope you guys got to read some gay/queer/trans books in June because obviously Pride Month. You should read those books all year round, but I hope you got to read some good ones this month because like, worth it. Worth it. And let me know down below if you've read any of these books and you really, really enjoyed them because like, I have thoughts, obviously, even though I can't articulate them very well. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time.